Thank you very much, Regan. Good day, everybody. Thank you very much once again for joining us on this Digicon. To the members of the media who loyally come along and pick up the latest in detail around how we in the province are dealing with the energy crisis. But of course, those of you, the citizens of our province, thank you very much for logging on, for connecting via our social media platforms, so that you are also informed. And again, I want to say thank you very much for the questions that are coming back, because that's exactly why we're doing this. It's about giving as much detail, open and transparency around what is happening with the energy crisis. Why do we not have sufficient energy in our system? What are we doing about it? And what does the pathway look like going into the future? And I am coming to you from the Western Cape Disaster Management Centre, and a number of people asking questions around what happens when we go to a higher load shedding level, or what happens if there is a blackout. How do we deal with it? And so the second part of the presentation, obviously from our disaster team, led by Colin Diner, to talk about those things. In any government, in any organization, you must understand what your risks are and you mitigate those risks. And again, that's exactly what we will be doing today. But the gist for me and where we find ourselves right now is, I want to say, in a nice, exciting space on a step forward. On Tuesday, our Minister of Finance tabled the budget. I've told so many people that we've asked for R1 billion. We want R1 billion to put money behind an energy plan. It's something that provinces don't do. Provinces in the past have not had to worry about energy. It's been someone else's mandate. And obviously, because of this crisis, just as we need to understand risks, energy has become a big risk for our citizens, for the economy, for being able to operate normal society. And so that was exciting. And I asked for R1 billion, and we've got 1.1 billion, and Alvi will be rolling it out. I've got the sort of high-level document here with me, and you'll see the load shedding, impact reduction, the green economy, project preparation, and so on and so on. And Alvi will take us through that budget. And of course, budget means you've got to have a plan. You then get the money to it, and then you've got to roll out that plan. The 1.1 billion is in a 3-year cycle. But of course, the majority of it is going to be spent this year, because we're in the middle of that crisis. There are plans going forward at different spheres of government, local government, provincial government, national government, to try to mitigate this risk as quickly as possible. And in this province, this is the provincial plan, to link the local authorities and their plans, their grid systems, our grid, which I say our grid is the provincial grid, but that is a national grid, the Eskom grid. And how do we get all this to work together? I also want to say that yesterday we hosted another one of our Energy Council meetings, and to say that Eskom was one of the presenters in the meeting to give us full details of where we are. This has always been my issues. What do those details look like? And the details that we've got, we will also be unpacking those details over the next week. But at a high level, we've got a majority of our power comes in the country from coal-powered fire stations that are an average of 44 years old. They, in the past, and as we know, have not been serviced as they should have been. So that system is not giving us the energy that it should be giving us. It's an aging fleet. It is also a fleet that we've agreed are going to come out of commission over time. So that is a risky area, and it's going to come out over the next medium term of power production. We've got to make sure new production comes in. And in the province and at municipalities, we are now stepping in to say how much of that new production is going to be at local level. So that really starts to gel from a plan point of view, is exactly how many megawatts are going to be coming into the system and when are they coming into the system. So we'll pick up on that discussion. If I can just say one other thing that was evident in the longer term vision of energy in our country. If any of you are in a position to, or you are worried about making a decision around investment into your own solar PV battery backup system for your business or your home, my advice is go on Green Cape website, contact our teams, go and find the best that you can. But my advice is invest into those systems. Our municipalities are going to be buying excess power back from you, but the long-term vision is this is going to take a very long time to solve South Africa's problems. We're going to mitigate your risk for this year as quickly and as much as we can. But even in 18 months or 2 years' time, the new energy systems, which take a long time to build, are only going to be coming in. Our risk is over the medium to long term. That's where the risk lies. We must understand that there are no quick fixes to this problem. If there was, I promise you, we would have done it already. So that would be my advice initially. But with that, thank you once again for joining us. I'm going to hand over to Alvi Lester, who will take you through that plan, which has now received its budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Premier. And yes, let me just reiterate the fact that the problem doesn't go away in the short term. It's definitely something we need to look at more sustainably going forward. And that's quite critical to understand. And maybe just if you look at the slides, and again, just to recap, what were some of our objectives? Again, is reduce the impact of load shedding in the short term, and then start to look at the level of lower reliance on the national grid in terms of supply. And we have given some of those targets. But I think this is probably the most critical slide out of the lot. And this is really an extract of what was presented by the Finance Minister in the week. And you can see over the entire period, we've got about 1.1 billion set aside. There are about 20 initiatives that we're looking at over this period. And if you look at it, we've got quite a bit of effort and budget set aside for demand side management in year one, which is this year, 9.7 million rand. The alternative energy support for SMMEs, and this program again looks at assisting smaller businesses in terms of moving from the grid to off-grid solutions. We've got the green economy ecosystem support, and really again, focus here is around looking at what sort of industries can we actually support and create and stimulate around green energy. And we've got initiatives that are focused in particular areas, and I want to mention that the Saldanha SEZ is part of our focus area, the Atlantis SEZ is part of our focus areas, and this is where the green economy ecosystem is really focused in. We've got a project called municipal pool buying. The idea around municipal pool buying is to look at how potentially can we aggregate the load that's required by some of the municipalities. And instead of negotiating 5 times with a trader or with an IPP, that we can actually negotiate better terms, better pricing, if we look at higher volumes, and we do this in a more efficient manner at one level, as opposed to doing it 5 times. We've got the municipal IPP procurement process, and I know we've listed Stellenbosch, but I do want to indicate that we've got a number of municipalities in this program. Stellenbosch is quite close to us actually going to the market to procure services from an IPP. What we're really looking at is going to the open market, saying what kind of megawatts are we looking at, typically what kind of pricing are we looking at, and for what period are we looking at this. And then we will get responses from the market in terms of what's available, what are they willing to pay for that, and what kind of periods do we need to agree to. So we are supporting municipalities in the process of the IPP procurement. We have a pilot project that we're looking at that is looking specifically at containerized solar solutions, and we are looking at these in the short to medium term. We're looking at about 4 pilots across the province. These are containerized PV solutions linked to a hybrid battery system, which literally means we should be able to take up to 4 tons off the grid for a period. We should be able to get the impact of load shedding reduced significantly in those towns. And we'd be able to use that data to inform any decisions going forward in terms of what other towns and municipalities we can enroll this out to. We've got the gas power exploration project that we're looking at. And this is an option in terms of our RFP, where we are saying we need to consider all our options, wind, gas, green hydrogen. These are all options that must actually be part of the RFP, and we need to do feasibilities in the next year or 2 to be able to understand if these are viable options going into the RFP. On the green hydrogen, again, also feasibility taking place, but also us setting up the structures to be able to deal with the green hydrogen project going forward. So you can see in our mix, it's not just a combination of just solar and wind, but we are looking at all the alternatives to have a good balanced mix in the province for our RP. Now, if you have all the generation in place, what is quite critical is that you need to evacuate this energy. And to do that, you would have to have some grid upgrades. And this is both at the transmission and at the distribution level. We've set aside 3 million rand in this year for us to look at the infrastructure upgrades that could be required. I must also indicate that a lot of this is focused on the municipalities that are going to be grid ready and are also going to be energy ready in terms of own generation. We've got focus on municipal electricity master plans, and these will inform our integrated resource plan going forward. It will also be an input into our generation, into our planning, into our network planning program as well. And we've set aside in this year just over 1.7 million for us to do it in this year. But over the period, you can see we've got about 5.3 million set aside for this particular project. There obviously has to be a relationship between what we're doing and the jet IP nationally that's taking place. And we are looking at how do we link into the broader world decision around moving from coal-based energy to low carbon emission energy. And our plan, whether that is our IRP or whether that is our generation plan, will obviously consider the fact that we need to meet some of these commitments that have been made. Then we've got the establishment of the team that actually is going to be driving quite a bit of the activity in the province, and that's the core team, and those are operational costs that we're looking at. Further down and towards the end of the slide, you will see there is a focus on some of the operations in the province, and this is really to look at the efficiencies in our own buildings. It's looking at LED lighting for some of our own installations, solar PV installations for the hospitals, for some of our facilities, the schools, etc. And those are the focus areas operationally that we are going to be looking at. So over the budget period of 2023 to 2026, we expect that we would be spending in the region of about 1.1 billion. It is phased. Some of these projects are short to medium term projects, so we should see some traction in the next 6 to 12 months. The others are slightly more longer term, and they have a focus in terms of more sustainable generation. So we talk about the IRP, we'll speak about the generation plan, and we'll speak a little bit about the development plan, the network development plan. In the coming weeks, my plan would be to start to unpack some of these programs for you so you can get a better understanding of what activities are actually taking place in each of these plans, what are our timelines, and what are our commitments in terms of delivery. I would like to also add that what we've done in the last week is we've actually launched a website. And on that website, you'll have access, and we'll make sure that this link is given to you. But what it will do, it is going to act as a proposal funnel for us in province. The idea would be that anyone that has a solution that they believe can assist us, that you go onto this website, follow the link, complete the pages that we've asked, and it'll give us a very good view of what opportunities and what proposals there are in the market. Are these short, medium, or long-term proposals? What type of technologies are people talking about? What kind of windows are they talking about? And roughly what kind of megawatts do they expect would come out of their solutions? What we'd like to do with the system is to be able to determine which of these can help us in the short term, which of these can we look at for the medium and long term, and start to engage through a proper process in provincial government, engage these solutionists on what is possible for the future of energy in the province. Premier, thank you very much, and let me hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Alvi. I've said that we are at the Disaster Management Centre, and normally when we're at the Disaster Management Centre, there's a massive crisis on the go, and when you meet Colin Diner, you know that there's either a flood, a fire, a drought, or some intervention. But I must also say that this is an amazing resource for our province. Colin and the full team here at the centre They look at risk every single day. And, you have a good feeling when you know you've got clever people who understand risk, who are analyzing it on a daily basis to make sure that we are prepared. And that's really that part of this energy crisis that we find ourselves in, is there are risks. And are we prepared for those risks? So it's an honor for me to be here in this center without a massive crisis on our hands. And it's really an honor to be able to hand over to Colin and say to Colin, let's hear the readiness for the hopefully never to happen eventualities, but that we are prepared. Colin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Premier. Good morning. I think what Premier says is important in the sense that our job is to protect the province, and specifically in this situation, our responsibility is to protect the province in the event of a major incident. So, and we do, I think what I'm going to talk about quite a bit is worst case scenario. And that's how we plan. We look at what's the worst thing that can happen, and then we plan around that. We've done it with a drought, we've done it with numerous fires, and that then makes the concept of train hard and work and fight easy is really what we try and do. So the short-term outlook for us, and this I must say is from a disaster perspective. So it really does, as I say, look at how do we respond in this. So we are looking in terms of the information that we received, that prolonged high stage load shedding between 4 and 6, and that is expected to continue for a significant amount of time. There's a number of conditions, and we obviously have to keep our eye on this condition. We know of the shortage of generation, but when we have a situation of increased unplanned unavailability, that's when we have the late night calls or the emergency warnings that there's going to be an increased unavailability of power, and that's then one of our points that we then use as a trigger. Limited fuel capacity at peaking stations, the need to conserve and replenish the depleted emergency resources, which generally happens over weekends. And then specifically this time of year with all the rains that are happening when it comes to compromised coal and then also compromised emission performance. Now, I want to say that I'm going to talk about national blackout. I'm going to talk about what could happen in the event of a blackout. But I want to say that the risk of a national blackout is low. We plan for a blackout, but it's not imminent. It is something that is in our worst case scenario, and it's something that we work on as far as that is concerned. So what could get us to that point? So we've identified those 7 specific risks. Some of them are more prevalent than others. Some of them are more real than others. They're already with us. And then there's others that could happen in a very short space of time and could put us in a situation that we actually have to activate and that we have to work very quickly to get ourselves operational and going. So firstly, a primary energy constraint, a generation plant performance, infrastructure damage, which we've seen from time to time, industrial or social unrest. We've also seen strike actions, and we have to prepare for those kind of things, shutdowns, etc. New supply capacity, a increase in demand, and then the post-blackout recovery, which I'll deal with in the next couple of slides. So the impact is really mostly on the economy, critical infrastructure, which we're already seeing. Obviously, there's a security risk, and then society in general. So what we do is we do really that part. Our job is really to look at those risks as opposed to restarting the system and rebooting the national grid in the event of a national blackout. So just to look at our operational planning. So we look at 2 risks. And the first risk is a prolonged high load shedding, high stage load shedding. So that is where we start seeing load shedding happening above stage 6. So you're going to see many hours of load shedding. The system operator goes and has to take a lot of load off the system so that we can not go into a blackout scenario. So what we will see is the impact of that. There's so many impacts. I'll speak to that in a minute. And then also we see system failures due to insufficient replenishment time. So certain infrastructure needs replenishment time to replenish water resources, energy for specific functions, and there's not enough time between the load shedding stages for this to happen. So that's the first challenge that we look at, and what that risk brings to us is from what we've seen from stage 4 to 6 is diesel supply, the logistics around diesel supply, backup generation to critical infrastructure, and that's where we see hospitals, retirement homes, water and sanitation. Those backup supply runs out, and although we have protected our hospitals very, very well, specifically we started that during the drought, we certainly have to keep an eye on the many different medical facilities out there and make sure that we have to cover that. And then, of course, the security at critical infrastructure is, we haven't seen much of that in this province, but what we have identified as a risk is where power areas is shed and cables get stolen or infrastructure gets stolen in that period that the system is not live. The concern, of course, beyond stage 6, if we get into a scenario where there is even more significant load shedding, there's a couple of areas. Obviously, what we will do and where we are now is we are with what we call a low activation. So we activate the disaster center in the event of an emergency or a disaster. And what we do there is we make sure that we've got on the spot information, that information is disseminated to who needs it, and that we ensure that the right resources are responding. In the event of anything beyond stage 6, that will be an immediate full activation of the disaster management center, and then we will be managing the various risks from here. So you can see the risks there. I'll speak about them in more detail around the blackout plan, but it really does speak to a whole range of society and of the daily activities of people that we need to deal with and that we have to have on the spot people here. So we do have a process whereby every government department at provincial government, we also work with various national departments in the province, and then each municipality does have a team that will be linked to us, and then we'll be able to manage it from there. So then just when we talk about a national blackout scenario or a black start, what does that all entail? So just to give you an idea of what that is about. So a national blackout scenario, I think there's a lot of talk been, and there's a lot of media, social media posts coming out saying that we are on our way to a national blackout and that this is imminent. And so what I want to make clear is that if a blackout happens, it would be because of a sequence of events or a huge event that would create the kind of shock that would lead to a cascading collapse of the transmission generation system. And that would mean that across the country, there's a total loss of electricity, and the grid is basically then off. So the first thing is, as I said, it's got to be, it will be a single incident, which could then lead, as I said, to a cascading of events. The one important thing is that the warning can be very short to virtually no warning, because it's an event, it's an accident type thing that has happened. So we could be informed by the system operator that they have now gone into a very critical time and that this is imminent, but it will be a very short period. And we've prepared for something like that. Or we could be informed by the system operator that it has already happened. The duration will depend on what went wrong. So we've heard of many people speaking about how long it could take. It will really depend on what was the incident that took place, how quick that incident can be isolated, and then when it can be brought back. The scenario that we look at the worst case is a 14-day situation of that it would take to get the entire grid back up and running in a worst case scenario. So that's what we plan for. The impact obviously will be large across a very large scale, across many various parts of the community. And from a disaster perspective, that's what we have to look at. Obviously, South Africa, there is a uniqueness in the sense that we have seen national blackouts in other parts of the world. We've seen it in Europe, we've seen it in North America, but they have had the advantage of having neighboring countries that they've been able to use to assist them in recovering from a blackout. In South Africa, we don't have that. We're a net exporter of electricity. So we really are reliant on the systems in order to get that done. So just how does this work? The system will be, should we go into a blackout scenario, the system operator, the Eskom National Control, will conduct a black start procedure. Now, what's very important is that this has to be done very, very carefully and in a very well put together system of steps that has to happen. The system restoration and the security of the system is the highest priority. What we mean when we say that is that none of the steps can be skipped. You actually have to go through every step very carefully, make sure that that step is secure before you can move on to the next step. So you will not see a situation where due to whatever reason these steps are skipped so that they can go somewhere else. It has to be done sequentially and very, very carefully and with caution and not with speed. Because of the way that it works is we speak about, the term is called islanding, and that it basically means that the country has a number of electricity islands. It's generation regions, and what will happen is these islands are what will be used to restart the national grid. Now, the priority will be KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga because the coal-fired power plants are there the location of them more generally is there. And then the residential load, as they bring the load back, will be preferred ahead of the other loads as it is a predictive load. So then what does that mean for us as disaster management? What is the scenario that we have to deal with? So there's a couple of focus points that we've put our focus on, and these are the areas we're looking at that we will have to support as a province nationally. But from a disaster perspective, what we will look at coordinating is firstly water, the management of dams, and the problem of the non-provision of fresh water, sewage systems, transport and mobility. Obviously, there will be a huge challenge as far as transport and rail systems are concerned. Health, the disruption of hospitals, clinics, and pharmacies, the disruption of emergency services, specifically from a communications point of view. Communications is going to be something that we've identified as a major challenge. Then commercial and industrial and financial markets. We've got to look at food. We've got to look at how do we prioritize the protection of our food security. Law enforcement and security services, obviously, we work very closely within that part of our structure in order to protect the operations that will have to happen. And then, of course, we also have the issue around fuel security. We've got to make sure that we have sufficient fuel to be able to cover the various activities related to supporting this operation. The provincial response, I'll quickly deal with that. What we do with every disaster risk, we identify what our objectives are going to be. And this is really just something that we do. It's general. It looks always at the top priority, which will be the protection of human life. And then we start working into protection of property, the environment, to ensure that people are not suffering, to make sure that law and order is happening with our partners, and then to assist and to do whatever is required to bring the system back. What have we got in place? We have a major electricity contingency plan, which has various stages and includes a whole range of role players. We have a standby system, as I mentioned earlier, throughout the province of people that would be activated in a very short period. I spoke about the low activation and the monitoring the impact continuously. We have the electricity disruption task team, which is separate to the task teams that Alvi is responsible for. This looks more, as I said, at the disaster situation. Our local disaster management centers, we have disaster management centers in each of the district municipalities as well as the metro. They are on alert. We link to them and we provide information with them, share information with them all the time. And then obviously we are working very hard. We do have a redundant communication system, but we are looking at significantly improving that in the next couple of months. Just the provincial command and control. So in a situation where we have a national blackout or a major system emergency, the executive oversight will be the provincial cabinet in this province. The senior executive management of Eskom will work with us, as well as the prof joints, which is the security component. The strategic command will be the Western Cape Disaster Management Center, where we are. Eskom's tactical command and control, the prof JOC, which is the Provincial Joint Operations Center of the South African Police Services, and the provincial government response teams, where every government department has one of those teams. And then it goes down to the operational coordination, where actually the boots on the ground would be moving out and working in the specific areas. Just very quickly, these are the various clusters. So we have clustered all those risks into specific working groups. And these are the groups that will come together. We exercise this plan with them. They'll come together and look at their specific activities, at what needs to be done to support the blackout recovery and the incidents that have happened because of that. We used it during the drought. We've used the same kind of system during the COVID-19 response. It's a system that works well for us. We have the specialists in their areas, and we're able to make that happen. Then just on activation. So what this flow chart really shows is just how we work from the very smallest incident all the way up to a national blackout, and what the decision making should be in those areas. So there's specific times when only the center monitors what's going on. That's at your low levels of load shedding. But as it increases, we then activate different levels of response up to the point where we can have the full response if that is required. Just how the structures would happen, obviously we would be informed by Eskom national control of an incident that has taken place, and then there would be activation from the NatJOC, and that would then go through the provincial level, where the provincial cabinet would be involved as the executive oversight, and so it would move down into the municipalities. A system that we've worked on to be able to activate very quickly. Just from a readiness perspective, a couple of things that we'd seen, and just some ideas for yourselves. Understand the schedules. I think that's very important, is preparation. You know, we spend a lot of time preparing in the disaster center for all kinds of stuff, but it's important for you to understand the schedule in the area where you're in. Know your area, follow the updates. There could be changes. Things go with a few more units get lost, the schedule changes, so make sure that that's in place. If you have people who make use of chronic medication, if it's oxygen, if it's other medication that they have to take at specific times, make sure that access is simple. We must not be in a position where, because of people not being able to move, at night, etc., they're not able to access their medication. So that must be a priority. Safe liquid petroleum gas usage is very important. What we have seen is people have started a meal on a stove, the electricity has gone off, they just need to finish it off. They bring in a gas cylinder, they put it on top of the stove plate. The plate is not being turned off. The electricity comes back during the night. That plate gets hot. The gas cylinder is still on top of it, and the gas cylinder then heats to the point where it explodes. And I mean, you can imagine the incident or the situation that then could develop. Security. Are your security systems working in a load shedding scenario? Are you able to activate those systems and make sure that they are in place, specifically from a business perspective? Emergency contact numbers, make sure you have not only the emergency numbers for the fire and rescue services and emergency medical services, but your security company, etc. Surge protection, Albi will speak to. Do you have enough emergency lighting in your house that you'll know where you need it? And it's always good just to have a plan to ensure where to go and the paths that you need to follow, and that you've got lighting for that. Keep your electricity appliances charged for the period. They could, in most cases, last through that period. And then fuel security. It's important to have your vehicles filled up, because if there should be a disruption to the fuel supply, and that could be for any reason, it would be good to make sure that you do have that plan in place. And I think it's also important to limit travel in those periods. It just makes it a lot easier in terms of managing traffic, managing emergency situations. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dino. Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Mr. Lester. I'll now open the Digicon up to the media to pose questions. I note I have received a few questions already via WhatsApp. So I'll focus on those to begin with. And then as we process and work our way through those questions, you're welcome to keep WhatsApping me, or you can simply put your hand up and you can pose your questions directly to the panel. So from the Cape Argus, we have a question. In the provincial load shedding impact reduction plans, what do the emergency load shedding packs consist of, and who qualifies for them, and when will this be rolled out? And then specifically to you, Mr. Lester, you mentioned that residents and businesses will start experiencing relief from the province's energy resilience short-term initiatives and plan within 6 months. Could you please indicate which initiatives specifically will deliver this and what relief they will deliver?
Thank you very much, Regan. So on the first question, in terms of the load shedding relief packs, we're busy speccing what was going into those packs, but I can give you an idea of what typically we would see going into those packs. So we'd like to see a rechargeable light, and typically that light would have inputs for USB, so you could look at then cell phone charging as well attached to that light. We are considering if there is a solar rechargeable option, because that would be ideal, but we need to look at the sustainability of the product as well. I think one of the other products that we're looking at is very similar to what you have in these hot and cold bags, which is, if you do some cooking, you can in fact put it in that bag and it stays warm for at least an hour or two. So that will offer some relief over the load shedding window itself. We are targeting the lower LSMs in this initiative. And we're also looking at the indigent register that municipalities are sitting with. And we're trying to find a good balance in terms of who we then target as the audience for, or as the recipients to these products. So that will be the load shedding relief package that we're looking at. The second question is the initiatives that we're looking at for immediate relief in the next, say, 6 to 12 months. I think there are a couple of things that we're considering here. The first is the incentive for smaller businesses, SMMEs, where we're looking at incentivizing them to go off-grid into alternative systems. And again, this aligns also what is being done nationally. And so we've set aside some budget for this year and how we can assist those SMMEs. And this will be driven predominantly through our Department of Economic Development and Tourism. The second option, which is the containerized PV project that we're looking at. And this is literally a 6 or 18-foot container where you can, in fact, put solar PV out. Those are linked to batteries and inverters in the actual container. They get connected to the municipal grid at various voltage levels. But effectively, what we will do is we would reduce any load that we take from Eskom. We would take that off, and we would supplement that by going for the containerized PV. The idea would be that during the day, you would actually be able to use the solar panels to charge the batteries. And then at night, over the peak periods, you would then run the battery when you don't have any light available. So those are the options that we're looking at in terms of short-term relief. We're also looking at potentially incentivizing products and services, specifically talking about energy efficient products, and then obviously efficiency services that we're talking about. So the demand side management program is also a short-term initiative that then deals with how do we manage and curb the demand if we can't actually get the generation capacity to increase. That initiative is going to focus on education. It's going to focus on how do we set targets in the province? How do we then contribute as a province to the national picture? And hopefully try and get national to support the idea of if we go this route, that we can in fact then be exempted from potentially stages 1 and 2 of load shedding in the country. The further initiative is around load curtailment, which is really a technical solution. We would typically in a household install a little smart curtailment unit, and that can actually manage the circuits in your house. So we can program that circuit, or you could quite easily program that circuit to say at a particular time, either the circuits that run your geysers or that run your power sockets, that they can go on and off at particular times. You would target the peak periods, so you can actually have less energy drawn over the peak periods. So these are some of the systems that we're looking at in the short term that will actually assist us. Thank you, Dylan.
I trust that covers those two questions. Two more questions here from Heart FM to the Premier and Mr. Lester. I'll read it verbatim, but I think it's what the reporter means is very few municipalities, for example, the city of Cape Town, Stellenbosch, George, Mossel Bay and Saldanha, they've shared their plans to lessen their dependence and their reliance on Eskom. Do you believe that that is a sufficient number of municipalities to achieve the goals that the West Cape government has set for itself? And then just a follow-up question to the Premier. During yesterday's Energy Council meeting, did Eskom officials, did they share how power utilities grid capacity is looking like for the rest of the year? And what was your reaction? And then just an add-on question I've noted that's just quickly popped in here as well. What was your takeout from the Energy Council meeting yesterday?
Thank you, Rugen. So let me take the first two questions. So in terms of the grid capacity that Eskom is going to have available, so we are speaking about the transmission grid. At the moment, there is very limited capacity. In the Eskom transmission development plan for the next 5 to 10 years, there are initiatives in place that will actually see increased line capacity and also increased transformation capacity in the substations. I think the challenge that we sit with is that to achieve that line capacity and transformation capacity typically takes nothing less than 18 months, and that's the shortest possible window. And you need that relief in a much shorter window. So I think what we're planning to do in the province is to then look at how do we, as a province, create that capacity within the municipal grids in a shorter window. Yes, we still need the Eskom grid capacity. We definitely need that for wheeling, for transferring energy from the north into the Western Cape. But in the interim, we'd have to look at how do we, in the short term, then look at municipal grid capacity and municipal transformation linked to our generation.
Municipalities.
So with the municipalities in our municipal energy program, we've got the 5 that we've highlighted. I do want to indicate that based on the load that exists in the Western Cape, and that's about 3,800 to 4,000 megawatts, depending on what season you look at it. But let's say 3,800, 60% of that load is actually taken up by the city of Cape Town. So the initiatives that the city then starts to address, does start to address the 60% of the load issue that we have in the Cape. The balance, the 40% is spread amongst the remaining municipalities. And if you look at the remaining municipalities and you take Stellenbosch and you take Paarl, Saldanha, George and Mossel Bay, then you've literally got to almost 90% of your capacity in the province. So our focus is very much on the municipalities that have the biggest load. And if we start to address initiatives in that space, then we certainly start to address the bigger issue in terms of the load. Of course, we're not going to neglect the other municipalities at all. The idea is that we would have projects that would then also, depending on the maturity level, start to develop in those municipalities as well. I think over our period from now to 2035, the idea would be that all our municipalities would have a lower level of reliance and have some form of independent generation in that municipality. Thank you.
Can I say that, obviously, just adding on to the municipality question, I mean, obviously, every single municipality must be putting their plans together, and we will help wherever we can, because, we've all got to be playing a part in this. Obviously, the bigger municipalities have more capacity, but that's why the MER program has been there for a few years already, to try and help in a space that we don't normally work in. It's not that municipalities or provinces have been putting in their own power in the past. We're now in that position because of the overall environment we find ourselves in with a shortage of energy supply in South Africa. And as, of course, we would like to see it happening in every single municipality. I also want to say that the takeout from the Eskom discussion, number one, my most important takeout, which I said to the council yesterday, is that our decision to put this plan together, to put this kind of budget together, to have all of these projects is absolutely justified when you look at the pressure that Eskom has as an energy provider to the South African economy, to the South African people, the pressure that they're under, for whatever reason. I'm not going to go into those reasons. I mean, we are not able to have enough energy over the short, medium, and even going into the longer term. As I said in the opening, you could see in their long-term planning of even the decommissioning of coal power into the future poses a risk, because you've got to get new power into the system to decommission old power. But also noting that the old power, we know, has not been serviced sufficiently. It's got an average age of 44 years. Everybody seems to use cars as an analogy, but it's a car that's getting old and it hasn't been serviced properly. It's got a lot of issues, and so you can't drive the thing at full speed. It just not going to make it. So you've really got to look after it, and that's our problem. We've got to look after it, but we actually need more power than it can deliver. That's why I said in the beginning, I think we've got to make sure that wherever possible, we've got to understand this is not a quick fix. And if you are able to invest, and I know we say go off the grid, but the most important thing is if you can put power back into the grid. The municipality's ability to buy power back from you and give it to someone else who can't afford to put new power in also makes the ecosystem work better into the medium and longer term. I think that there was a discussion on grid, and that was also, I think, in the same vein. It was we need to tackle the grid shortfalls, and again, not enough investment over time. I can't remember the exact numbers, maybe Albert can remember, but I mean the kilometers of grid that gets invested in, or ability to invest into new grid versus what we should be doing, is minute. It's like 300 kilometers as opposed to 10,000 kilometers, which is the demand. So absolutely, grid is critical at a national grid level. And that's why you'll see there's money here to look at specifically how do the municipal grids, and are they being invested in? Are they being maintained properly? Because they are going to be playing a much more important role as more people come in through the grid system. And then I think as well, we can get angry with Eskom, but Eskom still has to provide as much power as they can into the system. We, as the Energy Council, will work with them as best as we can into the future and bring them in as often as we can. And we also put out a message now to the new energy minister to say, as soon as your office is set up, please, we'd like you to join us as well in one of our energy councils. We've got to use whatever means possible to make sure we mitigate this risk as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Premier. Just before we have a question from the SABC here, but I know before the SABC put their hand up, there was a question that popped up on our WhatsApp line here. It's posed to Mr. Diner. You have touched on it through your presentation, but is the Disaster Management Centre in regular contact with Eskom? I suppose they're saying, how often do you speak to Eskom to get a clearer idea, perhaps on a daily basis, on worsening performance, so the centre can plan accordingly, so it informs your plans, your contingency plans?
Thanks. So we basically have two communications with Eskom. The one is where we get given a monthly kind of system status and what the projections are. But then we are in a daily contact, well, more than once a day. I mean, any incidents that take place, any decisions that get made, get sent to us immediately, and that gets shared across the province to all the disaster management centres. So there is an ongoing communication with Eskom that comes to this centre. Our system takes this and then disseminates it through everybody that needs to be informed.
Can I just also say that the detail in the presentation from Eskom to us is also data that is available. We did engage with them on it, and we will also bring some of those month-long slides into some of our presentations into the future, so that, of course, it's available on Eskom's website, but we'll also bring it in and then maybe explain it, because it also helps people see into the future from some of those presentations.
Thanks. SABC.
Hi, Mariska Botha from the SABC. Mr. Daniel, I know you said that the event of a total blackout is very slim, but with COVID, we also didn't know what would come. And we're sort of in a situation now where we're looking at the map and it says here be dragons. So what is your advice? Should that very short notice come that there is now a blackout, what is your advice for the ordinary people of the province and perhaps also the country? What should you have in your house? What should you look out for? Who should you look towards for communication in terms of factual, statistical info that can help them? Should you have an emergency pack ready with, should we stock up on baked beans and things like that? It sounds silly, but with the drought and with COVID, people didn't know and things went haywire. So what is your advice?
Yes, I think the important thing is that our planning is on a lot of different levels and in different areas, looking at things like food security and how you're going to imagine that. And so even if you do say to people, and I'm not saying that is what must happen, but even if you do say to people, have food available, or have this or that, or go bag available. I mean, you need to have a go bag available if your house burns down. You know what I mean? So preparedness and just having that kind of resilience within a family for all sorts of emergencies is important. Having additional medication, having all those kind of things across the board. As far as communications is concerned, it's very, very important to listen to the communications coming from the official channels. So we've gone to, we go to a lot of trouble in the province, like, for example, with wildfires, to give accurate information and to tell you exactly what's going on in terms of what the incident is doing. Obviously, social media is a challenge. It's one thing we haven't learned to manage from a disaster perspective yet. So the important thing is we are putting the structures in place where we will provide the communication. And I think that's where, in a total blackout, if you're not able to communicate, or you don't have a radio, or you can't get any messages on your phone, there will be identified places where information will be made available. And I think that's really, you have to sort of play what's in front of you. You have to see what the challenges are, and then you have to deal with them, and you have to keep people on board as you go ahead and do that. And that's what we would recommend. Thank you.
We are running against time, but we have received 2 questions via our social media platforms. So I'll focus on these, and these will be more focused directed towards the Premier and Mr. Lester. How will you end load shedding when PV is only available, obviously when the sun shines? What will you do at night when load shedding is required?
Thank you, Digicon. So the solutions that we are looking at are hybrid solutions. So it's not a one focused solution. So if you're looking at solar as an option, it will be solar with an inverter and battery installation. And the idea would be that during the day, the solar would run. We would then obviously capacitate the battery with the solar energy as well. At night, when we don't have any sun, we would then switch, the inverter would automatically then switch to a battery system that will then run the energy. So currently, a lot of households, residents are already doing that in terms of their sort of initiatives. And what we're talking about is a very similar approach, but at scale for towns. So we would actually run huge solar farms effectively. And I'll give you an idea. For 1 megawatt, we need about 1.8 hectares to generate 1 megawatt of solar. And that would then be linked to a battery system and an inverter system that would then be plugged literally into the municipal network. So, as the sun goes down, the batteries start up, and we then start to power that town based on the battery that's available. So that would be the systems that we look at. And solar is just one example. You could do exactly the same for wind and for other sources of energy. Battery is just the storage facility that you use. Thank you.
And just lastly, it's that you ended on that aspect of wind as well. We have a lot of wind in Cape Town. Asks one person on social media, can't we start wind farms?
Got a whole lot of.
No, well, certainly wind is definitely an option. It does already feature in the existing renewable plan that National is driving. And I can say from our perspective in the provincial space, and specifically our provincial RRP, we do see quite a combination of technologies that we can use, and wind is certainly in there. I mean, we're sitting in the province where we get the most wind, the most solar. So I think that for us would be a logical approach, is that we must harness what we have available to us. So that will definitely feature in our initiatives going forward. Thanks.
I'll just add to that No, that's why when you drive to Caledon, you'll see the wind turbines. You'll see the wind turbines in Darling. You'll see them up the west coast, and more and more of them coming. Obviously, those have been part of the National REAP programs, but now you're going to start seeing it linked to municipal grids and municipal programs, and part of what we're trying to achieve here, being solar and wind. And then maybe the last point on it, you will also see that the thing about batteries, or what they call dispatchable power that you can turn on and off. Could be battery, it could be gas, it could be another source of power that's not just based in renewable, because you need to get the two to balance. And that's why the city's tender that's going out now is a dispatchable power tender for 500 megawatts. So they really are focusing on what is it that you can give us now that will balance the solar and the wind.
Great. I think that covers pretty much all the Digicon at this stage. We now just hand over to LV for the useful fact of the week, as we usually do.
Well, thank you. So I think for most households, what's quite important is prior to load shedding, you do have the schedule. It's actually important for you to remove your plugs from the power sockets. Switching the TV off actually does not save you in any way. It just puts the TV, the microwave, etc. in a sleep mode. It's actually still on, it's actually still drawing current. So the one is you would actually stop drawing any current, and that's what you want to do over load shedding period. And also when the system starts back up, you do naturally have a surge in the energy coming through the circuits. If your equipment is plugged in, there is a high risk that you will in fact damage that equipment. If you're not going to unplug these units from the power sockets, I suggest that you start looking at putting in surge arrestor plugs. So when that voltage does come through, it actually does mitigate against any potential damage to your appliances or equipment. And hopefully you don't have that. And hopefully we also don't have load shedding going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm also just going to end off, and I want to say thanks to everybody for joining in. For me, first of all, I think the funnel, the place where you've got a great idea where you can submit it, and there have been so many of you have brought us great ideas. Thank you very much for that. We need to put it through a system that can have a process of verification, and that can end up into actual energy or actual megawatts. So thank you very much. And that is going to be on the Western Cape website. If you go there to the 110% green, and please, we need those ideas. We need those submissions. I also want to say it's exciting now that we've got the budget. It will be approved from the 1st of April, and those plans can now start to kick into place. Also, what will be in place is the ad hoc committee. It has already been agreed to that we will also report to in Parliament. We have to be open and transparent about this, and that every cent spent out of this money will also be made available to the public every month or every quarter, whatever the process is that Treasury will come up with, to make sure that it is open and transparent. And then maybe my last point again to say, and I heard the question about what should you have in preparation. And I think that's one thing that us as South Africans, we are generally not prepared enough for disasters. I think about people who live in places where they have earthquakes. And we've just had horrendous earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. People have notes on their fridges, the numbers, they have that jump bag, they have those things. We don't seem to do that. As someone whose family lost homes and fires and things, we should all have that. What do you do if, and better to be prepared and better to be over-prepared. And I think that was the other part of the presentation today. So thank you very much for joining us. Regan, back to you.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you, Mr. Diner, and your team here at the Provincial Disaster Management Centre, the NERV Centre, and Mr. Lester, of course. Thank you to all who joined. Thank you for those questions. And please join us again next week, same time, for our fourth Energy Digicon. Thank you.